I believed in the country. I was born and loved it immensely. And to leave that war-torn city of Amritsar was like so heart-wrenching because I felt that I was never going to get a chance to go back and visit that country. And the train that I was leaving on, my grandmother gave me this coin and she said, put it in your pocket and it'll bring you luck. And I made a ring out of that. So being born and brought up in Amritsar, in India was a great experience. And people say to me, how did you become, what happened? And I always say, when you have actually had your roots from India and you've actually got yourself educated there, you suck that soil and the water, it becomes you. You cannot not be an Indian anymore. You have to passionately love it. You cannot. It's a country that gave you birth. It's a country that you ate the mud off. You ate the fruit off. It becomes you. Having said that, do I love the country where I live? Yes, I absolutely love Canada. This is my hometown. But I cannot forget. So I want to pay homage to that country that I left. The country that I left is a country that I will always love, and I always will be. I always get nostalgic, but I apologize. But I just love it. I always loved it.
And your parents? Tell us about your parents.
My parents they live in Richmond, and they came in 1994 when I wanted to first open the restaurant. So I'd actually never gone back. I'd gone back once in a blue moon, but I'd never really gone back. So I kind of lost that from the age of 20 to 30 for 10 years. I just remained focused at what I was doing, which was, being an Austrian, being a chef, and learning how to cook and create French food. I actually never really learned Indian cooking, to be honest with you. I never actually went to an Indian culinary school. I learned French cooking. I'm actually a trained French chef. My grandfather was the nicest alcoholic man you ever meet. Nicest. He drank a bottle of scotch every night and smoked 2 packets of cigarette. And every night he would say to me, Vikram, when you grow up, you and I should open up a restaurant together. You can do the cooking and I will be the bartender because you will never charge me for food, alcohol. Because you will be drunk all the time. So ever since that young age, it was always my style that I wanted to do this for him. Actually, the name Vij's has nothing to do with me. It has to do and honor my grandfather, Roshanlal Vij. That's why. It's called Vij's to honor him. It has nothing to do with me.
Now, let's go back to how you got into the culinary arts. How did that start?
So I was studying in 1984. I leave India and there's nothing in India. India is going through a political turmoil. Indira Gandhi got shot. There was so much going on. And my father said, what do you want to do? And I said, I've told you this all my life. I want to be a Bollywood actor. And he said, no son of mine is going to become a Bollywood actor. So what is the next thing you can do? I said, well, I'll become a chef then. He said, okay, go figure it out. So I applied to some schools in Austria and in Switzerland as well. And the only school that gave me bloody admission was this Austrian hotel management school. But it was the best school out there to teach you to become a chef. It was the starting of a new chapter, a new life for me. And hence the chefing school started, hence the culinary school started.
What was the first thing you cooked when you were in culinary school?
This is funny. Being a Hindu, not eating beef in India, first thing the Austrians teach you and cook for you is a beef tongue. So third day I'm there, I start the school in the cooking process and saying, you need to learn the basics of it. So they're showing the animal and they say, here comes the tongue. And my God, that tongue, I'm like, what? This is a beef tongue? and I had to cook it and taste it and eat it. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I can't. I'm not going to do it. This is not what I set up for. And I, had tears in my eyes. I told the chef instructor, and the chef instructor took that pan where the tongue was and he threw it away and said, well, then you can go back. Like he just kind of pointed and said, you can go back. And I was like, oh my God, I can't go back. There's nothing for me back there. One of the lessons was there's nothing for me back home in India. There's nothing I can do. So I had to do it. And so one of the things that I actually made was a beef tongue, pickled beef tongue. I still remember. And actually eating it and like gagging at it and saying, I can't believe I'm eating it. And my mom, because it was in a few days, Mom had given me a can of pickles, like Indian pickles that you have. So I went and bought cheap bread, white Wonder style bread, and I would actually put the pickles on top and eat it, and I would be like crying, saying, oh my God, I've made a mistake. What have I done? Why am I here? I didn't speak the language. Here I was a talkative kind of a guy who loves to talk, and here you are in Austria, and you can communicate with anybody. But then I was like, after 4 or 5 days, I was like, I gotta do something here differently, man. I really need to do something different here. So after 6 months, man, I was speaking in German like crazy. People were like, really? You've only been here 6 months? And your German is so good? It's because I immersed myself into the thing. The good part of it is, as an Indian, because you speak 2 or 3 different languages, the Punjabi, Hindi, Gujarati, being in Bombay, you're able to pick up the languages quickly.
So you graduate, and do you get picked up by restaurants, hotels? Where do you go? How do you choose?
So you, as an Indian citizen, you are only allowed to work for 6 months of the year. So this is one of the downfalls of having an Indian passport, was that you could just work. The Germans could work anywhere they wanted. The Austrians could work. The French could work wherever they wanted. But as an Indian, you could only work for 6 months in any of these towns. So every time I took on a job, I was already writing resumes to the next 5 different restaurants where I wanted to work. So I worked in Germany, I worked in France, but always for 6 months. The advantage to you was that you worked in these top restaurants for 6 months and you learned a lot.
How did you pick Canada? How did that transition happen? I want to hear a bit about that.
So I was working in Austria in a really fine restaurant, and there was a gentleman called Ivor Petrak, who's general manager of one of the hotels, was having dinner at the restaurant, and he wanted to have something spicy. So you know how I said I had some spices all the time. Mom had given me achar and spices and stuff like that. I had some spices in the room. I went upstairs, went downstairs, and I made him this beef stew, but I put some Indian spices in it, like I put some garam masala and some little cumin seeds and stuff, whatever I had at the time. And he tasted it and was like, oh, this is delicious. And so then he asked me to come out. I met him and he said, here's a card. Guys like you should come to Canada. I was like, Canada? Who the hell goes to Canada? Why would you go to Canada? And the reason is because being in Austria, you become so food centric that literally your plate is like this, and you get a little steak with a little 2 broccolis going like this and 1 carrot going like that, and it's like so frou-frou, right? I mean, I belong to a smoking club, I belong to a whiskey, because it's such a food and wine culture in Europe. Like we wouldn't even start our dinners until you had a bottle of wine before that was the European way of doing things. So all I'd heard about Canada, to be honest, was all these guys eat as hamburgers and drink beer. Why? And I was like, why would I go to Canada?
Sure.
I had no desire. But I had a little bit of a time frame between my 2 seasons. I just applied to him, and guess what? After probably 4 to 6 weeks, I got an envelope from him with a 1-way ticket and a 6-month visa to come to Canada. And I worked at the Banff Springs Hotel. That's what I did. His name was Ivor Petrak. He was Czechoslovakian. He was an immigrant himself. And so he knew that once I came to Canada, I would not want to go back to any other part of the world, because it is the most beautiful country to live in and most beautiful part of the world. And so Canada.
So there's a transition here as well that I want to. Where does the entrepreneurial mindset happen where you're about to say, I'm going to open my own business?
Every Indian at heart is an entrepreneur. let's just face it. Even that panwala, the guy who's selling you cigarettes on the side of corner of India, is an entrepreneur. Think about it. We are all entrepreneurs at a certain level. That guy who's come from his small little village, if he collects 10 rupees in his pocket, the first thing he does is he goes and buys little 2 or 3 packets of cigarettes and little 1 matches, and he stands in the corner and he hopes that people will buy individual cigarettes from him.
You're consistent. Like I've known this man for over 10, 12 years. You've consistently been doing something, and we'll talk about those things later. But I want to go back to the story about how did you start your first restaurant?
So I worked for John Bishop at the time as a chef. I was working in the kitchen with him, great guy. And then one day, and he's British, and he says to me one day, he says, if there's anybody who can do modern Indian food, it's you. You can do it because you have the knowledge of doing the front of the house and the back of the house. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But I thought to myself, I was like, I want to do this modern Indian food because every time I went to the Punjabi market, all I saw was this buffet for $6.99 or $5.99, all you can eat, and terrible service. It was almost like the mom was in the kitchen, the sister's in the front, and I'm a fat guy sitting on the till, ringing the bloody bill in. And I was like, why is this happening? Why is there no more culture into this Indian food? Because Indian food and Indian hospitality is so beautiful. It's so gorgeous. It's so welcoming. I made this business plan and I went up to them. They had a venture capitalist kind of investment firm. I went up to them and I presented my case. And I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do modern Indian food with bright stemware, with bright glasses. And I want to do this, I want to do the wine list that's local BC stuff. And I'm going to create this. And they just looked at me and they said, nobody is going to buy Indian food this modern style. All these white people want is a buffet, or the Indians want buffet. This is not going to work for you at all. You should go. I'm not going to give you any money. And I was heartbroken because here I had written the business plan, thought everything was going to work for me. These guys were going to be, they had the money, they were going to give me $23,000 I wanted. And I had tears in my eyes. I was like, oh my God, So I came outside, and the next day I called up my dad. I said, Papa, this is what happened. I can't open up a restaurant. And he was like, why? And I said, this money that I'd asked for, this seed money for $23,000, I'm not going to get it. He said, okay, no problem. No problem, be strong. No, just be strong. You know how the Indians like, be strong. Be strong, be strong. A month later, he comes from India. He says, I'm coming to visit you. I was like, okay, after 10 years you're coming to visit me out of the blue. You had no desire before that to come and see me. I was like, why don't you come to Canada? No, it is too cold. No, it's too cold. We're not coming. You come to India. So he comes, and I'm sitting there. We've had 2 days, jet lag is over. We're sitting there, and we had a couple of scotches, and he says, he tells my mom, he says, Kusum, her name is Kusum. Kusum, oh, bag le aayi. Go get the bag. So I'm like, what bag? So he tells her, go get the bag, and my mom comes in this brown paper bag, $23,000 cash in a brown paper bag in US dollars. And then he puts it down, we had some scotch, puts it down, says, go fulfill your dreams. And I just looked at it, and I was like, wow. So I had saved $10,000, he had $23,000, and we bought our first restaurant on Broadway and Granville Street. It was a one-man show. I used to actually cook the dish. I used to put it on the pass, and then I would turn around, wipe the plate down as if I was really busy, and I would go and serve it. My breakaway point at that time was $100. If I sold $100, I was going to survive. So we opened the restaurant up, and I had met Meeru at the time, just very briefly after that. And Meeru was an American citizen and couldn't work, so she would just hang out in the kitchen. And my cook at the time, who was a dishwasher, her name was Amarjeet Gill, and she still is my head chef today. Amarjeet Gill is my head chef today. And I will say this, for all my talk about Vikram and all this here, it is my women in the kitchen that put the best foot forward for me. The fact that I can sit here and have a conversation with you is because I have 80 women, Punjabi girls, who are working extremely hard, grinding the spices, roasting the spices, and treating the restaurant like their own family, as if they're cooking for the family. So I always dedicate everything I do to them, because without them, I would be nobody. I didn't want to do butter chicken. I didn't want to do chicken tikka masala. I didn't want to do naan. I was just so sick and tired of thinking, because it was almost like it's like everybody wanted to just do the same thing. It was a business for everybody, whereas this was a passion for me. I loved cooking. And coming from India, I knew that there is more than Indian food, more than butter chicken and chicken tikka masala in India. This vast, who cares? If I come to your house and you make me a nice sabji, a vegetable stew and a dal, who cares what it's called? Does it really matter what it's called? At the end of the day, if the love and the passion of the dish is there, that's all that matters. Yes, there is butter chicken as one of the recipes, but that's not only Indian food that we have. So the idea was to create modern Indian food with the Indian spices. It is not fusion, but just not do mainstream Indian.
Well, I mean, so I've been to the restaurant, amazing experience. So we talk about the food right now, but there's this other culture that everyone talks about at Vij's. It's the front room, and everybody, it's first come, first serve. It's waiting. There's no reservations. So we talk a bit about that concept and why people, some of the most interesting people in the world come there, and they will wait. Tell me about that.
But the idea of no reservations was because Gandhi said we are all equal. Here, Elliot Trudeau walked into the restaurant one day with Justin at the time. Justin was a young kid, and he walked in, and the whole restaurant went pin drop silence. Like, oh my God. And they wanted to see, there was one table, they wanted to see if I would give up my principle of giving him a table ahead of anybody else. And I did. I took him to the back. He waited for 20 minutes like everybody else, ate dinner, and he was leaving. And I went and touched his feet. Like in the Indian culture, you touch his feet. And I said, Mr. Trudeau, I just want to say that it was your policies in the 1960s that allowed immigrants like me to come into this country and be successful at it. I just want to say thank you very much for it. And he was so nice. He kind of picked me up, gave me a little hug, and says, you know, I've had Indian food lots of times, but this is one of the best ones I've had. That affirmed me that if Pierre Elliott Trudeau can come into the restaurant and wait like everybody else, you couldn't have asked for a bigger statesman. So all the things that I felt wrong that was in the industry, I tried to change it through my own businesses, through my own restaurants.
Your name started to rise. You became this more of a personality. Your restaurant had a great reputation. People loved the restaurant for you as well. I wanted to talk about your persona that came out of this, because there's a lot of it going on today in a lot of the work you do. But I want to see, when did that transition from a restaurateur to more than a restaurateur? When did that happen? I'm curious.
So there was somewhere along the lines when I felt the restaurant became my vehicle to talk about my passion of food and the culture and the country and the cuisine that I left behind. And it became suddenly important to me that, my God, I need to be an unappointed ambassador of that country. I need to make sure people understand that I'm not just an ethnic cuisine, that I am a cuisine and a force to reckon with, that my food and my spices are like notes to a musician. They're as important to me today. That's what happened.
How did the concept grow after that point to more restaurants, to more locations? How did you transition?
I'm one of those really, and I think Sukesh can attest to this because we have this meeting today. I'm one of those entrepreneurs that if I earn $1, I spend $1.10. Then I run around like a crazy madman trying to earn that 10 cents, and then I'll go and spend another $1.10. I'm always in debt. I will always be in debt. I will never have a lot of money. Why? Because I love to spend money. So every time I do something, if I make money, I just invest in something else. I'll just put more money into something else. And that has always been a goal of mine. So it's always been, okay, I'll never sit on my laurels is what I'm saying. I'm not sitting on and saying, oh yeah, we've got 2 restaurants, raking it in, making money. It's a desire to bring awareness to the cuisine. I want people to be able to enjoy and eat food, and not just opening up restaurants for the sake of it, but bringing awareness to the cuisine and the spices and the flavors and everything else.
So when did TV start for you? When did these opportunities, and we'll talk about the latest one, but when did that start for you, and what were your thoughts about that?
TV was always like, you have chefs come in the afternoon, or in the daytime, or in the afternoon, or in the evening, saying, come on in and come and just cook this dish and cook that dish. And I was the new kid on the block, basically, right? I was the new Indian flavor of the month kind of a thing on the block. I just grabbed that opportunity and I said, oh shit, I'm not going to let this go, man. I like it. I love it. So it was like the same stage and the same platform that you get from being, in front of your restaurant. Same thing happened to me with television as well. I didn't actually sit there to say, I'm going to do these TV shows. So Chop Canada, Top Chef, Recipe to Riches and Dragons, they just came to me. I didn't have an agent or anything. They just came to me and said, do you want to do this? And I was like, oh sure, I can squeeze one more thing on my plate, because I'm a glutton for punishment. I love working hard, and I love working lots of hours, and that was what it was.
I'm curious. Let's talk about your latest project, Dragon's Den. Or there's probably other projects too, but let's talk about that, the most public one that we're doing.
It was, I will say it was one of the toughest experiences that I've done. This was totally different. This was a bizarre phenomena of somebody asking you. Plus, and I've always put money in my own pocket and invested in my own businesses, never in somebody else's. So for me to do that was like, oh shit, I'm actually going to take money from my own pocket and give it to you, so that you can go out and become successful with us. And it was tough. And the analogy that I would make is that it was like skating with Wayne Gretzky and Jerome McGillna and Gordie Howe at the same time, and you don't even have your skates on, because these guys have 9 seasons under their belt, and I don't even have 1 season under my belt, and I'm trying to. So I would get up in the morning, I would do yoga, I would relax, I actually would talk to some people. I actually had a guy whom I would talk to all the time and say, this is what happened last night, what do you think I should say, what should I do? And I watched enough of the episode. So I did all my homework when I went in there. I didn't just go in there and say, oh yeah, I've arrived. It was a tough gig, man. It is a tough. I mean, it's a great show, I love it, I think it's a great show, but it was a tough gig. The motivator today is the same as I want everybody in their household once a week to enjoy Indian food, Malaysian, Chinese, Singaporean, ethnic cuisines from different parts of the world. Because I really believe when you eat food from different parts of the world, you kind of understand each other's cultures. You want to go and travel to that country, you want to be exotic, you want to go and visit those places. I do want one day, I'm telling you this, the way there's the swish of Nike, I want that elephant with the 3 stars one day to be that popular. I want Indian food to be that popular. It's a personal goal of mine, and I won't stop.
You are, and you have always consistently been, such an amazing host to so many people, and I want to thank you for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, Vikram Vij.